I think we should start with Justin. I know traditionally we go left to right, but I think we should start with Justin. And, you know, this is the rundown. You know, we've heard about it from him. We've seen it before as well. It's this great Tusk team with the Talonflame rounded out with the Gothitelle, Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, and Tyranitar. Like, it really is looking
no surprises.
Then we get to Nathan's team, and I'll let you take this one.
That's an Orthworm, that's a Vivillon. The other Pokemon to round this out, I think, are also incredibly weird. They're just weird.
No, feels really, really good. So it could be really interesting, especially because Justin is a big proponent of this Great Tusk. The one thing I will say, though, is Great Tusk also has close combat, which it does not absorb the damage from. So you'd have to make a read and a prediction. We're not getting either of them, though, as the leads do hit the field. And Vivillon Armor Rouge, not one I've prepared or seen very much of.
Yeah, so the Vivillon here is going to be Compound I, so it will be increasing its accuracy for the sleep powder that it has access to. But very first thing we're going to see here is a switch from Justin to have that Tyranitar on the field, and Vivillon just being able to play it a little bit safe. The fact that the Sand has entered onto the field, though, it will break Vivillon's Focus Sash at the end of the turn, but just a double protect here to be able to bypass the taunt from the Gothitelle.
Yep, has to be careful, and Vivillon, you know, doesn't want to get taunted, does want to continue to play the game, because, you know, if Vivillon gets taunted, it's Pollen Puff only, right? It's not really very helpful, you know, not able to protect, but this is a great switch from Justin, gets the Tyranitar in completely for free, and this is why the Tyranitar has been such a popular pick, right? It just shuts down these Indeedee Armor Rouge teams so well, so we'll have to see if he can work through it while there is already this Sleep Powder hitting. Much better chance of doing that with the Compound Eyes.
For sure, and in fact, especially when Vivillon is a very quick Pokemon as well. That's going to be a move that is going to move first more often than not. An Armor Cannon, though, into the Gothitelle is going to be able to do a pretty good amount of damage to that Pokemon, but Armor Rouge is also going to be dropping some of its stats thanks to that move, and Gothitelle recovering a lot of that damage there thanks to its berry.
Yeah, the Citrus Berry helping it out immensely, and it is going to connect that taunt onto the Vivillon, so no more Sleep Powders. But most importantly, I think for Nathan, he has got the Sleep down onto this Tyranitar. My big concern is, can he deal with it before it wakes up? Because when it wakes up, looking at the team that he's bought so far, it's going to be able to do a lot of damage unless we see a Defensive Terror out of Nathan, and that could be something he wants to avoid in this one. Of course, you can start just Pollen Puffing and, you know, see what you can get out of it this time, but, you know, the more time you're spending with kind of these setup turns is more time for Tyranitar to wake up. And I think when that happens, the game could very quickly flip in Justin's favor. But for now, he's safe and sound, as it was asleep in that last turn.
Yeah, I think at this point, too, maybe making a little bit of a read that Justin's going to be pivoting around. It will be the Gothitelle now making a switch for the Fluttermane on Justin's side, and the Pollen Puff to be able to go into that Fluttermane as well. It was a nice attempt there at that super effective bug-type damage, but Tyranitar wakes up to get the Rock Slide, and that is just a quick double knockout onto both Pokemon on Nathan's side.
That is something that was going to be a risk. Justin's Tyranitar wakes up, lands the Rock Slide. Because it was asleep, Nathan didn't decide to go for a Defensive Terror on the either of them, really, right? Both, actually, the Armor Rouge and the Vivillon have that Grass type as the Terror, which would have been really great against the Rock Slide, particularly you know, for something like the Armor Rouge, which could have been looking to set up the Trick Room. Now we see what's in the back as well for Nathan. The combination of Iron Hands and Brute Bonnet feels like the Trick Room was something he's really relying on. Spent a lot of time trying to get himself in that position, right? Like, get the Tyranitar to sleep, buy that turn to be able to set it up, and then, you know, go Trick Room mode. Problem is, no Trick Room right now. Tyranitar's feeling real good. This matchup is a little bit harder for it. Obviously, it's not able to pick off things such as easily with Rock Slide, but overall, it still feels like it's done more than enough. And the big thing here is, what's in the bag? Great Tusk. Okay, well, Great Tusk is going to deal with Iron Hands, unless that throws up a Defensive Terror into the Grass as well. There's actually 3 Grass Terrors on his side. And then the Brute Bonnet, right? It's like, okay, well, the Brute Bonnet, you know, is also going to be able to deal with the Great Tusk, but it's going to get hurt for its trouble, right? Like, it could get really hurt in response.
Yeah, so that's why we're going to see a terrestrialization here of the Brute Bonnet to the Fire Terra type. And I think it's really important to also point out that the Iron Hands on Nathan's side is actually not an Assault Vest variant. It's going to be Citrus Berry, and going for a little bit of setup there as well with the Belly Drum, as well as a Protect. So that's going to play a little bit of a role here as well for the Fluttermane to be able to do a lot more damage. The Tyranitar, though, going for the Rock Slide. I think this Terra Fire might come back to bite the Brute Bonnet, but it avoids the attack!
Doesn't matter if you don't get hit. As long as you don't get hit, you're in absolutely fine position and does get to land the Spore. I was definitely not feeling good about that Terra Fire, because at the moment, you know, that Terra Fire now means it's weak to the Great Tusk that's in the back, it's weak to the Tyranitar Rock Slide. That's certainly not the easiest to use, but it does get the Fluttermane to sleep. And, you know, it's one of those, again, the awkward Terras. It's like, right, you don't get knocked out by the Moonblast, you get rid of that typing that makes you weak to that, but you're now weak to the Tyranitar, so the pairings on this team just feel so good for Justin. He does need to do his Tyranitar and deal with it rather quickly, because, you know, he needs to get through to the Great Tusk so he can start hitting it.
Absolutely. I mean, the Great Tusk is going to be a big problem here, but even though the Rock Slide does come through, it's still not enough to be able to knock out this Brute Bonnet. So it's able to get the Spore to connect onto the Tyranitar. So now both of Justin's Pokemon on the field are asleep, and the Drain Punch to follow it up is just a clean one-hit knockout for the Iron Hands, and it will be able to restore HP back up to full.
Yeah, that's an interesting turn there, right? With the Spore, you know, probably expecting to see the switch into something there to maybe try and catch it there. It does look a little bit weird at that point because he just spores it and just immediately knocks it out. So covering himself with the switch there, obviously nothing coming out of the Fluttermane at that turn. But here's my big concern is at some point, Great Tusk will make its way back onto the field, and I'm just not sure how the Iron Hands and the Brute Bonnet as a combination do manage to step up to it. The Iron Hands can stay healthy with those Drain Punches, but Brute Bonnet's dangerously low, and any wake up from the Fluttermane or even a rogue attack would probably take it out.
Well, especially because the Brute Bonnet Terra to Fire type. It doesn't have that Dark typing anymore to keep it safe from the Gothitelle Psychic. So right. Gothitelle could send an attack its way, knowing that it has Psychic available. But you also have Fake Out, and that's going to be a great way to be able to shut off some of the utility. And another turn one wake up here for Justin means that the Moonblast is going to be enough to finish off this Brute Bonnet instead. And just like that, Nathan's Iron Hands is looking like it's in for a rough time for the Fluttermane, Gothitelle, and Great Tusk that are still left for Justin.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to make sure it's a healthy Iron Hands with these Drain Punches as well. You can see the Iron Hands does have that Belly Drum, so something that he's going to have to deal with a little bit differently. But, you know, it's certainly not the position you want to see it in, and Justin's really managed this game really well. You know, he's had a lot of kind of support and slowdown thrown his way. Yeah, there's the Moonblast as well. Fluttermane just, now it's awake, can just end that game. And that's maybe the downside of no Assault Vest, right? No Assault Vest means you do just get knocked out by that. So easy cleanup there for Justin. Wasn't phased by all of the disruption in turn number 1 or 2 matchup. We'll see if Justin can close this one out. There is a mix. The Great Tusk not coming in the lead right now.
No, but it's going to be the Fluttermane instead next to that Gothitelle. But the same leads here for Nathan in the Vivillon and Armarouge. And this is where things can get really interesting. You know, before Vivillon was set to go for the Protect first, and then it started to go for these Sleep Powders and tried to get some damage down with the Pollen Puff. But I think when you have the Vivillon and Armarouge on the field this time around, maybe you go for something like a Rage Powder. You can still play it a little bit safe, but provide an opportunity for the Armarouge to maybe go for a Trick Room here. Justin doesn't have Trick Room available on the Gothitelle. It's just going to be Taunt and Fake Out there to try to shut down some of that damage.
Yeah, you got to do something to try and get this Trick Room up. You've seen that you're the slowest team. You've seen that that's something he's really stuck with. So, you know, maybe just wants to scout things out. But once again, you know, Justin making this early switch into the Tyranitar. So, making sure that that Focus Sash in the Pavilion is not going to be particularly present. The Sandstream will break that at the end of this turn. So as long as you bring it down to that Focus Sash point, you get the knockout at the end of the turn anyway. The big thing here is, you know, it's just going to be another Double Protect, and I do think that, you know, taking your time with a Double Protect turn 1, you know Justin can switch into Tyranitar, certainly make things harder. The Shadow Ball, though, goes into the Vivillon, and is not going to be any impact right now, but yeah, it's just a round of Sandstorm damage.
There is, but I think one of the things that Nathan can really do there with the double protect is not only does it deny the fake out pressure from the Gothitelle, but you also now have the information about this Choice Specs Flutter Mane. What is the move that it wants to lock into? And it looks like it's going to be Shadow Ball for now until Justin decides to switch it back out.
Yeah, Shadow Ball does give him a bit of information. He can switch in either the Brute Bonnet or the Orthworm that we have on screen to try and take that a little bit better. But he's still going to need a little bit of help in this whole process, right? Does have to be careful. And maybe, from my perspective, I think this Armor Rouge would probably want to be safe because we've seen what Rock Slide can do. I think going Grass here just makes a lot of sense to be able to take a Rock Slide and set up the Trick Room for success later. So much prefer this turn from Nathan, a drastic change from game number 1.
Yeah, this is definitely very smart here. The Tyranitar on Justin's side, while it is a flying Terra type, actually doesn't have access to Terra Blast, so you're not really threatened by anything on Justin's side of the field too much. Even though the Shadow Ball is going to come through from Justin's Flutter Mane onto the Vivillon, it is not enough to be able to secure the knockout here. Vivillon with a bit of investment into the bulk there, but that means the Sleep Powder is going to connect with the Tyranitar once again.
Yeah, this Tyranitar as well, not being able to attack this turn, so even though you got the defensive Terra going, does mean that you're not able to do anything about that, and now it's Trick Room time, so Armor Rouge has got this set up quite nicely. This Flutter Mane is a lot more at risk of being attacked, because it is going to be, of course, now the slowest thing, in essence, on the field. And you got a little bit of time to try and work through this Tyranitar. You already gave up the first turn of sleep, though, so you got to be careful that it just doesn't wake up immediately after. I do like this change from Nathan that we see him going for, just trying to, get down some damage a little bit quicker, so get the Vivillon out, maybe save it for a late Sleep Powder as well, and you'll be able to play it that way. So, yeah, try and get the damage on the Flutter Mane here, assume the Tyranitar stays asleep for a turn, and then you're able to, catch it with the Brute Bonnet in this following turn. So he's definitely planning ahead, knows how to work through these turns of Trick Room that he has available.
Yeah, I think getting the Brute Bonnet in as well, it's not going to be taking too much damage from the Tyranitar, so you could threaten something like the Loaded Dice a little bit later to help boost up that Bullet Seed, make sure it's going to hit multiple times. The Armor Cannon now coming through from the Armor Rouge into the Gothitelle takes a lot of damage there. Gothitelle, again, has the access to that Citrus Berry, so it should be able to heal up some of that HP, but still looking way better for Nathan in this game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice switch to catch as well, right? Like, being able to take that out feels pretty good. Tyranitar stays asleep, which is, I think, pretty important. Not letting that Pokemon just wake up immediately and start dealing damage. It does mean that in the following turn, Brute Bonnet can target it down. So, yes, one of them is going to get stopped. One of them is probably going to get faked out and isn't going to be able to attack this turn. But at least I feel like pretty largely, Justin's going to be able to, at least land some damage. And it's really up to Nathan to plan ahead. I mean, the Gothitelle can only stop one of them. And I think it's like, okay, I think you go for the Brute Bonnet here, just so your Tyranitar, isn't just knocked out before it wakes up. Because it's like, okay, well, Gothitelle will go down, but then you can maybe switch it around. It's not needed for the taunt anymore. So it would just be, a little bit more of an offensive option, which Gothitelle not known for its high damage power.
Yeah, that's true. I kind of wonder maybe if there's utility a little bit later, if the Vivillon is still able to make an appearance later in the game, but for sure we need to see a little bit of a defensive Terra coming out here. That's why Justin's Tyranitar is going for Terra Flying. It means that the Brute Bonnet will not be able to do that super effective damage to it anymore. And the fake out going into the Armor Rouge. So a great defensive play here from Justin to try to read into that spread of damage. Armor Cannon would have certainly picked up the knockout there onto the Gothitelle, but look at how little this Bullet Seed is doing now to the Tyranitar thanks to that Terra Flying.
Yeah, this doesn't feel good if you're the Tyranitar, the Brute Bonnet attacking the Tyranitar. You're expecting to get big damage down, but you're just not getting anything done. Tyranitar does stay asleep though, so this could open up some potential plays in the following turn. There is going to be a little round of Sandstorm damage as well, so let's let that all go through. But, you think, okay, can Armor Rouge do enough? And, now it's a flying type, Armor Rouge has options, doesn't have to worry about it so much. But, of course, it is going to be Tyranitar in the sand with the Assault Vest, so you do want to hit it physically. Okay, and then let's take another look over at the Brute Bonnet. Doesn't have anything right now that can really do that big amount of damage that you need, right? Like the best you're looking for is a crunch. So could be a double target angle, could be a way to just really try and shut down that Tyranitar, because I think the Tyranitar probably needs to go. if you're a Nathan side. I mean, he's been in the Trick Room, has had it asleep for a while, but he's just not been able to capitalize on it.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense here in terms of the targeting. Like you said, maybe not worried too much about the utility of the Gothitelle. The crunch is going to take that Tyranitar down to a pretty more manageable amount of HP, but the taunt does come through onto the Brute Bonnet, so that will shut off its ability to go for something like the Spore. Armor Cannon, a follow-up though from the Armarouge, is going to knock out Tyranitar before it gets a chance to wake up. And so that's now Terastallization off the board here for Justin Carris, and he needs to look at pivoting to something else to deal with this Armarouge.
Yeah, but I think Justin's actually in a surprisingly good spot right now because, yes, he may have been losing that Tyranitar. The Sandstorm's finally gone as well, so that chip damage is taken away. But he did land the taunt on the Brute Bonnet, right? The Terra forced a double into that slot. He is going to be giving up the information of his fourth Pokemon. That is going to be the Great Tusk. And, you know, now Brute Bonnet can easily get taken out by this. You know, Armarouge, not so much. Armarouge is in a much better position right now to deal with that. So definitely a lot to think about. But, you know, I think not having the Spore on that Brute Bonnet means the Spore's not available, obviously because of the taunt from last turn. Does mean that as this Trick Room winds down, it's going to be forced into some awkward positions.
Yeah, I really like the ability here, though, to be able to, wow, just read into the Protect right away there. Great Tusk going to try to buy out this last few turns of Trick Room here. Pollen Puff from the Brute Bonnet will be able to restore the HP on the Armarouge to bring it back up to full, and that means this Psychic from the Gothitelle is not going to hurt as much. It actually allows Armarouge to stay alive, so the Expanding Force into the Gothitelle here just to whittle away at some of its HP, but getting the damage down is better than nothing. But now the Trick Room is over. Great Tusk poised here for some nice success.
Yeah, I think this is the big one for me, right? It's like, we know that if Armarouge wants to set up another Trick Room, it's not going to be allowed to do that because it's so low after that last turn, and the Brute Bonnet isn't probably going to be given too much room to move, right? Staring down a full health Great Tusk could be a tricky one for it to deal with, of course. The one play I'm worried about, which I don't think Justin is going to take the bait on, but I do want to call it out, would be like a headlong rush into an Earth Eater. But somehow I think close combat is probably looking a lot more tempting for Justin in this moment.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think that the targeting in this next turn from Justin is going to be very important as we see the Great Tusk actually transition off the field for the Fluttermane. Fluttermane was one of the starting Pokemon here for Justin and now is going to be staring down the barrel of this Armor Cannon. Fluttermane does hang on, but this is really dangerous territory here for the Armarouge. It was able to drop some of its stats, but at such low HP, it really doesn't matter that Gothitelle is going to be able to clean it up. Interesting interaction here that the Brute Bonnet is still going to be able to move, and despite the fact that it's taunted, it still has access to some really powerful attacks there. Bullet Seed enough to finish off this Fluttermane.
Yeah, the Bullet Seed taking it down, so we're now down to Gothitelle and Great Tusk, plus Brute Bonnet. But don't forget, there is also an extra Pokemon available for Nathan Ortiz. Still has that Vivian that he switched out earlier, so that's going to be able to help him out a little bit here. Maybe run some interference for a little bit, take some attention away from the Brute Bonnet. You know, you need to make sure that you're dealing with the Vivian, or else it's just going to put you to sleep, which is going to be a massive problem. So certainly some plays to make here. That extra Pokemon could be absolutely huge as we're seeing it. Oh, he's trying to switch it, but he's forgotten about the ability on the Gothitelle. I wanted to see it, but he's showing it off, but he's not using it just yet.
Maybe a little bit later. Vivian is quite low, so it's possible that that could get knocked out. Brute Bonnet's still staring down some super effective damage here from the Great Tusk, but Vivian is still an incredibly fast Pokemon. So it depends on how exactly this is all going to play out here. It's going to be the Pollen Puff into the Gothitelle to be able to get the knockout that is super effective damage thanks to that bug typing. And now we get a chance to look at this Great Tusk. I mean, close combat here into the Brute Bonnet should be able to pick up the knockout, and it does, but that now makes the Great Tusk a little bit vulnerable as it did just drop its defense and special defense here. I think the special defense a little bit more important, but it's time for the Orthworm. I wanted to see this for so long. It's also shiny. This is amazing.
It's Orthworm the Humble, and it is being given the job of taking down this Great Tusk. Of course, there's the Vivian there to help as well. but let's see if Orthworm can make an impact. Vivion's going to get it to sleep with the sleep powder. Great Tusk and its awkward speed coming back to haunt it a little bit here. Being put to sleep before it's given the opportunity to move. It's taking its first turn of sleep. Let's see it, Orthworm. Let's get it. Body press. It's going to take a few of those, but it is going to be given the opportunity to try and land that knockout.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, especially when the Great Tusk is asleep, you're going to see the Pollen Puff as well, just to be able to follow up on some of that damage. And despite the fact that it's not very effective, it is going to be able to do a pretty good amount here. Close combat into the Vivian, though, just to get the knockout, but that leaves this Orthworm available to go to her for another attack.
The defenses are dropped, too. That's, really not going to be helping things out there. So defense going down. Great Tusk losing some of its HP as well from the Life Orb. Orthworm gets the knockout!
And just like that, Nathan with that final attack will bring this series to 1-1. Look at that cheeky smile over there. He's happy about the Orthworm being able to show off, I bet.
He's so pleased with that.
Right, whether or not we will see, well, we'll definitely see one of these trainers here in the top 8, but it's about time we find out who with this final game. It's going to be same leads from game number 2. Fluttermane and Gothitelle here for Justin, and Vivian and Armarouge for Nathan.
Yep, Vivian Armarouge has been a pretty solid lead for this team. Not something that I thought we'd be talking about over the course of this weekend, but here we are in round number 14, talking about Vivian. That does mean that, there's Sleep Powder's available again, there's Rage Powder's available again, Trick Room's available again, so that Gothitelle can only taunt one thing at a time. I think that's something that's big, right? Is like if the Gothitelle doesn't get that targeting right, could leave the board a little bit open, but we've always seen this very defensive play from Nathan in both these game ones. He's always been just protecting and keeping himself safe, so not going to be able to do that this turn, as it's going to be a big change up here.
Yeah, the Fluttermane is going to be able to hang on or be able to hit the Vivian, but the Vivian hangs on here, and the Gothitelle going for the taunt into the Armarouge. Nathan's not going to be too happy about this one, as you can't use the Trick Room now, and Justin put himself into such a good position, being able to shut off one of the biggest utility tools here for Nathan.
Honestly, that's a really big turn there for Justin. Being able to know that it's just a nice read, right? Like, Nathan's been cautious, he's been cautious, so you think he's got to go for it this time, right? The Trick Room setup was what got him game 2, so now he's going for it. Let me see that you're going to try it just turn 1. Okay, I'm going to let you Sleep Powder. That's absolutely fine, but he goes for the Sleep Powder on the Fluttermane, being the damage threat there, and so you go, all right, that's fine. Gothitelle, I'm just going to taunt.
I wonder if that could have been a damage roll, though. I don't know my calcs for Fluttermane into Vivian, but at least you know that the Focus Sash would have also kept the Vivian alive. But I feel like this is where it's going to be really interesting these next few turns. Can we see... Oh my gosh! The Vivian actually misses the attack, even with the Compound Eyes! Now we end up seeing the Expanding Force come through. Vivian actually gets knocked out here. What in the world?
Nathan does not want that Vivian on the board at the end of this turn, because it's just going to get taunted by the Gothitelle. So confidently, he just gets rid of his own Vivian with the Expanding Force.
What a play!
It does mean he gets a free switch in, right? Because what Justin could have done was just sort of let it sit on the field and not be able to do much. That does, of course, all rely on that Sleep Powder missing. So I think the goal was get the Gothitelle to sleep, knock it out, and just take out both of these Pokemon while they're asleep. And that was a really big play. Obviously looks a little bit weird when the Gothitelle doesn't go to sleep. So missing that is definitely something that they're going to have to take a moment to really consider and maybe readjust the game plans. But Justin hasn't taken a single bit of damage yet this game. He's already taken out this awkward sleeping Pokemon threat in the Vivian. Does, of course, have to contend with the Spore from the Brute Bonnet. But guess what? Gothitelle's still on the board. Gothitelle still has Taunt, so could be in a position to start causing problems that way.
Yeah, well, especially when we've seen some of the speed interactions here. Armor Cannon, though, going to move first, and it's hoping for some big damage into the Gothitelle. But as we saw before, this is not nearly enough to knock out the Gothitelle, and especially with the recovery from the Citrus Berry as well, you're going to look at a 2-hit knockout here from just the Armarouge alone.
Yeah, the Armor Rouge is going to be able to do the work, but the Armor Rouge is also lowering its stats a little bit here, so could get itself in trouble a little bit later. Brute Bonnet has fallen for the taunt, but hasn't fallen for it in Nathan's side by going for the Bullet Seed. It's going to start wearing down this Flutter Mane, see how low it can get it, and it looks like it's pretty close.
Is it going to be 4 or 5 hits, though?
That's the thing.
Is it going to be 5 there? Flutter Mane gets knocked out. Loaded Dice coming in clutch here. Also giving that Brute Bonnet 5 hits. But this is still not over just yet. Armor Rouge shook off the taunt, though, and the fact that it is still on the board, Nathan hasn't committed the terrestrialization yet, puts him in a pretty good position, whether or not he's going to be able to get the Trick Room up and running. Great Tusk, though, hitting the field, does have the ability to go for some damage onto the Brute Bonnet.
Yeah, I mean, he can go for damage onto the Brute Bonnet, go damage onto the Armor Rouge as well. That's sort of a really tough one to, you know, try and target down, figure it out that way. But, you know, the Gothitelle probably wants to just try and deal with the Armor Rouge again, wants to land that taunt once more and keep this Trick Room out of the game, because if the Trick Room goes up, Great Tusk is going to be very vulnerable right now. Great Tusk is really going to struggle against the Brute Bonnet, so it could just be like, let's just go for it this turn, right? Armor Rouge is super low, so Armor Rouge is going to be able to get knocked out, or not low, sorry, it's got lower defenses, so it's going to be able to get knocked out if it does get hit pretty hard. And of course, Gothitelle is, you know, able to put down what we saw in the last game was a decent amount of damage. So these terrestrializations are going to make and break the game. I do see a head nod from Justin, so feeling pretty good about that one, maybe, or just mulling over his options.
Yeah, I think it's tough because both the Armor Rouge and the Brute Bonnet make for excellent terrestrialization candidates in this match, but. Look at that, Great Tusk just going for the protect.
Well, this is what I think is interesting. He's protected the Great Tusk there. He's now seen that he's got 2 fire types on the other side of the field, right? And so he really only has one call to make. Is Orthworm in the back? Because if Orthworm's in the back, he may be hesitant about throwing down something like that Headlong Rush or the Earthquake, but there are definitely other options. And what I think could be really interesting here is if he's looking at Tyranitar in the back. We saw Tyranitar was flying Terra. He's held the Terra on his Great Tusk. He could just start Earthquaking these guys right now. And yeah, it doesn't matter if you switch Orthworm in, you're still probably going to get the requisite amount of damage on the other one, especially if you just do a combination of Rock Slide and Earthquake here.
Yeah, this is a great defensive terrestrialization opportunity here for Justin. The Tyranitar as well, just going to be able to keep itself nice and healthy from the Brute Bonnet. That's a really, really big way for Justin to keep himself in this game. And you know you love to see Great Tusk being able to put down those Earthquakes, but it's, in fact, we have a little bit of insight to what's in the back, and it is not what we think it is. It will be the Indeedee. So even better, though, in this position, this is where you have to play the mind games. Justin want to go for the flying terrestrialization here. The Psychic Surge is on the table, and Armor Rouge can go for some pretty powerful expanding forces now that would hit both Pokemon, and with the terrestrialization here onto the Tyranitar, it is going to lose its Dark typing.
Yeah, I mean, it loses the Dark typing, but don't forget, this Armor Rouge has probably got one turn to do it, right? Does have those low defenses from the early Armor Cannon, so as long as it's, you know, the guaranteed hit Earthquake comes through, I imagine you've got to be feeling pretty good, and with the spread attacks as well, yeah, there's the Earthquake, so Justin knows he's got this one pretty much on lock right now, I'd say. Just being able to throw that up, not going to affect that flying Tyranitar. And the big thing here is that Indeedee switch in does not feel safe right now. Doesn't feel particularly good. Oh, a big crunch to follow it up.
The call!
Yeah, that means as well, the Indeedee just got taken out. You revealed there's no Orthworm available, so that's an easy lock-in into that. And of course, you know, you're just going to get the little bit of Sandstorm damage down. You don't even have to worry about redirection or any silliness from that Indeedee the next turn. So this Fire-type Brute Bonnet does have a lot of work to do.
It does. It definitely has a lot of work here, but you're really, at this point, trying to hope that you can take out this Tyranitar, which is going to be very difficult to do. Tried to go for a double protect there. It's not going to work on Nathan's side. So the Great Tusk gets to go for the Earthquake. It will be the first to move here. And as it's going to hit both the Armor Rouge and the Brute Bonnet, Armor Rouge will fall. It is now up to this Terrafire Brute Bonnet in the face of this Tyranitar.
Yeah, let's see if the Tyranitar can get it done. It's just going to go for the crunch. No messing around with the Rock Slide. And Justin Carris bouncing back after the longer game 2. A perfect execution of his Great Tusk and Tyranitar team.